request everyone to take their seats, please. It's a proud privilege for Moneylife Foundation to host the launch of this absolutely monumental book, the 10th edition of Kanga and Palkhiwala's The Law and Practice of Income Tax. We're a little overwhelmed at the kind of goodwill that Mr. Arvind Datar, who is the editor of this book, enjoys, and the kind of dignitaries we have here today. May I please welcome our guest today to come onto the stage, Mr. Soli Dastur. May I please request you to come onto the stage, Justice Bharucha. Mr. Palkhivala, would you please come on?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have the privilege of introducing Mr. Arvind Datar, who has edited this fantastic book, which is in every lawyer's shelf, the Kanga and Palkhiwala's Book of Income Tax Law and Practice. Mr. Datar is a senior advocate of the Madras High Court and, of course, the Supreme Court of India. Apart from having a law degree, he is also a qualified cost and works accountant. Mr. Datar set up his practice in 1984 in Madras High Court and now specializes in taxation, company and constitutional law. He is the author of the commentary of the Constitution of India 2nd edition, Guide to Central Excise Law and Practice, Central Excise Procedures, and has written over 150 articles for various journals and newspapers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Arvind Datar, an outstanding lawyer and a great human being.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Justice Bharucha, Mr. Palkhivala, Mr. Datar. It's one of those rare occasions where you actually have this opportunity to introduce someone as, bold and as well known as Mr. Sohrab Erach Dastur, popularly known to his friends as Soli. He's arguably and undoubtedly India's most leading income tax jurist. Now in his 50th year or perhaps more of practice, he is a living legend. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Soli Dastur.
Good evening to all of you, and it's my pleasant privilege to introduce Chief Justice Bharucha and Sri Behram Palkhivala to all of you. Chief Justice Bharucha, as you know, was a judge of the Bombay High Court and then rose to be the Chief Justice of India. It is for me an extremely important day that I have the brother of Mr. Palkhivala to be at the 10th edition when I have completed the 10th edition of my book. He himself was an eminent lawyer. He practiced on the income tax side for several years, and of course due to his age now he doesn't practice. But all the time, whenever I have any doubt about any particular book, I take his counsel. I then requested him to write a foreword this book. It's very rare that you get the person who wrote the first edition to also write a foreword for the 10th edition after almost 64 years. So it's a really historic moment in that sense. And when I asked him to write a foreword, he said, "What shall I write on?" And I said, "Sir, please write how you wrote the first book and how it came, and how you did the subsequent editions." He has put it very beautifully in 3 pages, how the first edition was done. And because the typist at City Civil Court was charging too much money, they both decided to type the book on a portable typewriter themselves. Believe me, in a typewriter, if the mistake is there, you have to junk the whole page and do it again. We take computers for granted. And then how each and every edition it went on, and I think the last 3 editions, till Mr. Choksi took over, was almost done by him, and Mr. Palkhivala would supervise the book. So I'm extremely happy to introduce Mr. Behram Palkhivala. It's a very, very emotional moment for me today, and I thank you very much, sir, for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to release the 10th edition of Kanga and Palkhiwala's Law and Practice of Income Tax. The first edition was in 1950, when Mr. Palkhivala was just 30 years old and 5 years at the bar. I do not know whether any other book which has become a locus classicus was written by a person aged 30. One of the features of a book which is is to give you food for thought. It is not to be just a compendium of cases. One has to be forthright in his views, express them, and they may be right, they may be wrong. Mr. Datar's views are mainly right. But nevertheless, one has to express it. And Mr. Datar has not hesitated to comment adversely on decided cases or on certain provisions in the Act. He has squarely condemned the view which has been taken by the Supreme Court in connection with the scope of Section 147 regarding the reopening of assessment. He has also, in very bold language, condemned the decision of the full bench of the Kerala High Court in the case of CIT versus Woodwest, where it has overruled the earlier decision in the case of CIT versus Travancore Cement. And Mr. Datar has pointed out that one must have a wider meaning of what is the scope of derived from. One thing which Mr. Palkhivala's life brings out is a contradiction in two philosophical thinkings. One is that if you have the will, you will overcome all difficulties. The other is, what is destined will happen. Two a bit contradictory. But Mr. Palkhivala's life illustrates both of them. In his early days, he had a stammer. And can you imagine a person with a stammer becoming the most erudite advocate of a subject? He had writer's cramps, I think even later unto his life. Can you imagine a writer of books having writer's cramps? So that shows the will to overcome. And what is destined? Mr. Palkhivala applied for a job as a lecturer in English. The post was given to a lady who had teaching experience. Mr. Palkhivala applied for joining the Indian Civil Service. He made the first attempt where he was not successful. The second attempt he could not complete because of a disease which had spread in New Delhi. But that shows you fate. Otherwise, if he had been selected as a lecturer, he might have ended up as the Vice Chancellor of the university. If he had joined the ICS, he may have become the Cabinet Secretary. But therefore, what was destined has happened, and at that point of time there may have been some disappointment, but what God wills happens. If one wants to know about the modern position of tax law and practice, I would advise you to read the preface by Mr. Datar, where in the 10th edition he has brought out all the issues which today are very relevant. He has referred to the tax code and expressed the wish that it never becomes law. I do not know whether that is wishful thinking, but I can certainly say one thing. It should not become law in its present form. Thank you.
I must sincerely thank Mr. Dastur for taking the trouble of going through the book and noting some of the comments we have made from time to time. In the modern age, with computers and all judgments being available on CDs and on the internet, the relevance of a book becomes not so important as it was the earlier days. When I was a junior, the only way you could trace a case was in the AIR manual for other laws or a good commentary which would collect all the cases at one particular place. Today you just have to put Control F and go to a particular name, you'll get it on the net, or you go to a CD and just search for the judgment. And it's unfortunate that lesser and lesser people are referring to commentaries and textbooks and going straight to the CD and so on. So when we started this particular book, I've been asked to say a few words about this edition. As you know, the last edition came in 2003 through 2004, and I've been writing for Vadva and Company earlier, which has now been taken over by LexisNexis. And in 2007, March or April, I had just finished the second edition of my constitution in January 2007, and was starting the courtroom genius for the Palkhivala Trust. At that time, Mr. Vadva and Mr. James Martin, who was the, I think, global head of LexisNexis, they came to Madras and requested me to take up this book. I told him, I've got the constitution, I've got my central excise, I've got this courtroom genius, what do I do? He said, no, you please take it up, nobody is doing it, nahi to ye kitab mar jayega. So, itna acha kitab hai, somebody has to take it up. So in a weak moment I agreed, knowing that I always suffer comparison with such an eminent book and such eminent writers like Mr. M.E. Palkhivala and Mr. B.A. Palkhivala. But I took it as a challenge. I said, let me at least take up this thing, because I had some income tax work as well, apart from central excise work. The first thing we decided when I met Mr. Dharam Palkhivala, he told me, keep it in one volume. So I told him, sir, when you did it, you had about 150 ITR. We are now in 350 ITR. It will not be possible to keep it in one volume. So we set a deadline of keeping it in 2 volumes. That made it slightly more difficult because we could not give elaborate comments, and we had to keep the comments as terse and pithy as possible. We also decided to use modern technology, and all the rules, notifications, double taxation agreements, the supplementary legislation like the settlement commission rules and so on have been shifted to a DVD, which is at the end of the book. So we have tried to retain it at 2 volumes. After I started the book came this sudden announcement that they may have the direct taxes code. So we had a big debate whether it's worth bringing out this book or whether it's worth bringing out the direct commentary on the direct taxes code. You can't say Kanga and Palkhivala law and practice of direct taxes code. It just doesn't sound right. But perhaps the Almighty destined that the direct taxes code doesn't come, and it's my strong prayer that it never comes. So this edition finally came, the 10th edition. So the direct taxes code derailed the book again for a particular year, for one year. Looking back, it has been a tremendously educative experience. In fact, after 30 years in the bar, I saw some sections of income tax for the first time. You know, normally you practice, you're confined to basically business taxation or capital gains and so on, and there are so many sections in the miscellaneous provisions or some other subsections which you never get to see. And only when you write the book, you have to go through those sections and comment. After writing books on central excise and the constitution, I found income tax was perhaps the most challenging, because each act, the constitution has got their own features. If you take the Central Excise Act, the act is just 40 sections, most of it is in rules and notifications. In the income tax, it's just the reverse. The act is almost 400 sections, the rules, etc., take a back seat. What was most difficult was to make sure that the case law I'm reading and making sure that it's still relevant, because it is not of an earlier assessment year. So every time you have to say, then finally we divided saying law prior to this assessment year, law after this assessment year, and that's how we have structured the book. At this occasion, I must mention that I think only 20% credit goes to me, 80% of the credit will go to my team, my colleagues who helped me, particularly young lawyers. My colleague Sandeep is here, who I thought he'll suffer brain damage because of the cell phone to Delhi almost 7-8 hours a day, because the printing is done in Gurgaon and we are constantly in touch. Mr. Srish Chandra is here. So a lot of youngsters, a lot of people helped tremendously in the book, but for the help the book would not have been written. It has taken 6 years to finish the book, and I have promised myself that as and when the loose part of ITR comes, I'll try and update the book as regularly as possible. I make a public promise, sir, that on 16 January 2020, we will have not the 11th edition, but the 12th edition. There will be one edition in between, if not more. And kindly block your diary because you are going to be here, and I would request Chief Justice Bharucha also to please, because you're a busy arbitrator, before you give a day for 16 January 2020, please block it for the Moneylife Foundation and the Royal Bombay Yacht Club. We'll certainly have it. And Sri Palkhivala also, with your son's yoga teaching and so on, you should also be here. And I request all of you, it will be a wonderful occasion if all of us again assemble 6 years from now on the birth centenary of Sri Palkhivala. That said, I would request those of you who practice income tax to write to me. I have been very happy with the response. I may tell Sri Dastur and Justice Bharucha that he said there will be a reprint. The first edition is already sold out, the 10th edition, and we are going for a reprint shortly. I never expected this kind of response. But more than the response, I'm interested in criticism of the book, where we have gone wrong, what portions can be improved, where the commentary is inadequate, because as you rightly put it, there's no point having a compendium of cases. We'll have to take up a particular proposition and write on that. And as I wrote the book, I find that there are several areas where the views are ambivalent and some kind of clarity is required in the years to come. With these few words, I thank all of you for being present here. I hope you like the 10th edition, and I look forward to your comments and criticisms so that the 11th edition becomes even better. Having said that, one thing I must mention, the moment we got the assignment to do the book, we decided that we will get the same color and the same color, the same font of the 7th edition, which was worked upon by Mr. Palkhivala. Maybe the 11th edition will go to the 8th edition color. We said, let's get back the color and the font size which was there when the 7th edition was published. As a junior, I remember when this book came, if I'm not mistaken, this was the first time the book came in offset press, whereas many other books were in letterpress in those days. This was one of the few books, perhaps the first book, which was made by Tata Press in offset press, and for every junior it was a great pride to have it right in front of your bookshelf to impress the clients that I've got Kanga and Palkhivala's income tax. So we brought this back, and this has also been quite well received by the audience. With these few words, I thank you very much and look forward to the 11th and the 12th editions as well. I may now request personally Chief Justice Bharucha to at least say a few words, sir.
There will indeed be a very few words. I am delighted to see this book again. In the same manner in which it was published earlier, it's recognizable as Kanga and Palkhivala. I am sure Sir Jamsetji would have been very, very pleased, Nani of course, and to see this book again. I have always been a great admirer of people who have the energy to write books like this. It's very, very different from being a practicing lawyer or even a judge. I wish this book all success, and I wish its author great success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice Bharucha. May I request Mr. Palkhivala to say a few words, please?
My friends, there are moments in life when the heart is too heavy for words and silence does duty for speech. This moment, at least for me, is one such. You will therefore understand if I say only a sentence and no more. I am deeply grateful to my younger brother for bringing out the 10th edition of the book on which my elder brother had spent 40 years and more. Thank you.
So I'm going to request Mr. Sirish Chandra, the publisher, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Hi, good evening. Hi, good evening. Eminent dignitaries of the dais, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of LexisNexis, it's my proud privilege to propose today evening vote of thanks on the occasion of the launch of 10th edition of the legendary title Kanga and Palkhivala's The Law and Practice of Income Tax. It was a decade-long wait before the 9th edition, after the 9th edition, and probably worth its while, as emulating the high standards set by the master himself was not an easy task. Having said this, I am very happy, satisfied and proud that the arduous task of revising this masterly work was undertaken by Mr. Arvind Datar, the worthy student of the master himself. I take this opportunity to thank Mr. Sohrab Dastur, Justice Bharucha, Mr. Palkhivala and Mr. Arvind Datar and all the other dignitaries for their presence and participation. My special thanks to Ms. Sucheta Dalal and through her to Moneylife Foundation for stitching up this evening together and giving us the opportunity, giving us not only the opportunity but also a platform to launch this masterly work on income tax law. Thanks to all of you for making to this evening, and I look forward to your continued association in future. Thank you so much.